Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked, locked, here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. We're delighted you're with us in class today. We broadcast 2 hours from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains. Nathan is engineering the broadcast at GCN in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. And let me give you the numbers. If you'd like to call us, 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. We'll pay for the call. If you'd like to listen as you travel or listen while you're working around the house or at work, 605-562-6564. 605-562-6564. That's the telephone listen line. It's up 24/7 and it's working. I'm delighted to report. Today, Rich Sheben's with us for 2 hours. Welcome, Rich Scheben.
Well, thank you, Vincent Finelli. How are you this morning?
Very, very well. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this broadcast. You're going to be doing an educational piece on ideas and solutions for the bottom 93%, which is us. And I'm looking forward to hearing that. And then hour number 2, we're going to be talking about case studies, things, actual cases that we have experienced. A little bit more of what's wrong and what's right with America, what we need to consider and what we have done in our personal lives to make some changes and to help people see things our way. I'm looking forward to that. So, Rich, ideas and solutions for the bottom 93. And by the way, when we talk about the bottom 93%, we're not doing that in a disparaging way. We're just saying that, there used to be, when I was growing up, there were people who really were economically challenged, and then there was the middle class, and then there was, the wealthy. And now it looks like there's the wealthy and then everybody else. That's the way it's becoming, and there are fewer and fewer opportunities for those of us in the bottom 93%. So we're not saying it in a disparaging way. We're just saying it because we think that's the way it is. Rich, your thoughts?
Well, absolutely, Vincent. Thank you for the airtime. Thank you for letting me exercise my freedom of speech. Basically, the bottom 93% on the ladder no longer has representation. We no longer have a protection under the law. Let me just give you one example that I've mentioned on the air. There was a tax assessor that came from a neighboring county here in northwest Montana. And this is just a few years after I had a local Lincoln County tax assessor come out to assess my property. I invited him in my home, showed him that I lived off-grid, no interior pipes, no hot water heater, no pressure tank. Well, this new tax assessor didn't even come in my home. He says he saw it. Who knows if he even did that? And he said that I'm no longer on grid. How do you say that? I don't have corporate electricity. I am off-grid. He said I had a finished basement, modern heat, 2 finished bathrooms. I don't even have one real legal bathroom. Changed all my evaluations. And this is what's happening in the state of Montana. Montana is now practicing fraud. And the little people don't have any restitution. Okay? So what I'm going to do is give ideas and solutions. I'm going to just rip through as many as possible. A lot of these I talk about on the air over the last few years. But what I'm trying to do is get people to wake up, smell the coffee, realize that a lot of what the powers that be are doing are distracting, dumbing down, and dividing us by groups, race, ethnicity, gender, sex, religion, ideology, generation. This is why they're race baiting, sexual orientation baiting, gender baiting. We have to realize that we're living in this Kool-Aid political correctness world where we're losing control over our own destiny. Dr. Ben Carson even said the first words out of his mouth when he came to Northwest Montana was, "I hate political correctness." And when you are politically correct, you turn minorities into victims. And this is the tool that a lot of the people at the very top, because you got to follow the money, follow the narrative, the theme, the meme. It's all from the top down. These are all bought and paid for tools to maintain the division, the distractions, the infighting, chaos, and status quo. Some examples could be DACA, the Dreamers, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, KKK. Remember, Hillary Clinton's main mentor was Senator Byrd, which was one of the executives in the hierarchy of the KKK. Planned Parenthood. I mean, how long can we listen to the narrative, oh, it's all the white people's faults? Well, are they going to confiscate the wealth of Zucker from CNN, of Rothschilds, Rockefellers, Gates, Jonathan Gruber, Jeff Bezos, Soros, Murdoch, the Clintons? It's not a war on whites. It's a war on the bottom 93%, especially the poor/middle-class white male heterosexuals with a Christian name. It's a war on blacks. It's a war on Muslims. It's a war on females. They need everybody at each other's throats in order to keep us off balance to maintain the status quo. All this behind the scenes is bought and paid for. The George Soros types, the globalists. Come on, people. 8 people in the world have a higher net worth than half of the world combined. The UN, the NGOs, most of this is directly or indirectly paid for by the U.S. taxpayers and citizens of the West out of their pockets. So I'm going to rattle off a bunch of stuff. We have to realize that the globalist playbook is to manufacture perception, pity, guilt, and ideology. There's only 5 companies that own all the media and medium, and that includes newspapers, TV, magazines, radio, production companies, publishing companies. I mean, we're living in a Orwellian 1984 censorship Twilight Zone episode. We have to use financial, economic, social, and political rationale whenever we can. We have to live below our means. We have to know the fine line between needs and wants. Frugality from the household level, the corporate level, and the big government level has to be something that needs to be said on a regular basis. We have to bring back our mentor-protege relationship. And that's where the ideas and solutions come from. 90% of the college degrees are worthless, okay? It really is. It's a sad state when you see all this social indoctrination. And let me just give you an example. It's if you expect certain people to be on time, it's racist. University of California has chill zones with mats and beanbag chairs for naps. University of Michigan, for Trump derangement syndrome, has enlisted services of psychologists in a room full of Play-Doh and bubbles. The University of Arkansas eliminates C grades and starting at B- level. Some college students are intimidated by masculine wood paneling. People, we are really in a comedy zone right now, and we need to start talking about how we can benefit the bottom 93%, because we are losing control of our own destiny. I'm just going to go through as much as I possibly can here. We need to have a plan A, B, C, D, E, F as individuals, because if you're just going to stick to a plan A and then quit because it didn't work out for you, and it most likely won't, we have to show tenacity. Every city park and front yard has to start growing gardens. What we need to do is increase communication. There's a story out of South LA I've mentioned on the air a few times. You people are heroes. It was in a minority neighborhood. There was blacks, whites, Hispanics, male, female. Everybody was there working a 14-acre plot. They had a beautiful garden. It was actually a documentary. And some elitist who donated the land was told that you need to take the land back and be an Indian giver. Apparently, there was too much communication. Too many people were learning skill sets and self-sufficiency. People were stopping at gardens saying, hey, I want to do that. What can you tell me? What can you tell me about heirloom and open pollinated seeds and building soil and harvesting this and growing that and pests, for this? And what fertilizer do you use? And people were talking. They were learning. They were creating synergy. And the powers that be did not like it. We have to get back to self-sufficiency. We're teaching our children how to push buttons, manage paper, and be politically correct. We have to talk Donald Trump into creating some type of Trump channel on radio out of the White House. And we have to use it in the context of benefiting the little person. The little person in America has been forgotten. We need to fix our electoral system with paper ballots, receipts, and some type of accountability. I mean, it's been proven that we have over 6 million illegal voters in our nation. I mentioned Lewis and Clark because I'm really into that type of history. Coming out west, living my dream in nature. Well, when Lewis and Clark came to the Pacific, everybody voted. And today's media makes a big deal, and it is, that the black slave voted, that the woman Sacagawea voted. But you know what? When they voted on where they're going to put their encampment on the Pacific, they voted because they communicated. They didn't chant. They didn't yell. They didn't scream. They didn't do violence. They communicated with intellectual conversation, and that's what we need. The next one, it's not a commune. What I mean is the wealthy people are coming to the West and buying up as much land as they possibly can and landlocking Forest Service and BLM land so the average Joes, the little guy, can no longer access it to hunt, to fish, to camp, to garden, to do whatever they need to do to be thinkers in lieu of followers and to enjoy the heritage that the Rocky Mountains have given us. Well, it's getting to the point where the little guy can no longer access it. And what I mean by this is we need to have an end game where the little people can create a database, get together, buy land together, create a business, and then sell it in 5-10 years and cross-train skill sets. And I'll continue more after the break, folks.
Rich Stevens with us, offgridmontana.com. Offgridmontana.com. We'll be right back. That's Rich Stevens with us. Non-stop ideas and solutions for the bottom 93%. Rich, please continue.
Well, thank you, Vincent. Yeah, folks, I can go into a lot of details and specificity on each one of these, but I'm just trying to give these ideas and put them out there so you guys can communicate, so people can get together and actually have intelligent conversation. I don't mean to be condescending, but we need to start thinking outside the box. These are all outside the box ideas that base very little of the mainstream media talks about, maybe 2%. So I'm going to continue here. In the book, Chapter 15, I talk about self-sufficiency preparedness schools, everything from homeschooling ideas to trade schools to increasing skill sets like solar, like off-grid living, like raising animals, like gardening, making your own soil, because most of our soil in America, as you know, has been mechanically and chemically beat to smithereens, and just outside-the-box lifestyle changes. Okay, so you don't have to be stuck on GMO foods, hormones, steroids, antibiotics, and all the things that are making us sick. We need to enforce sedition, treason, and espionage laws because the wealthy, the super wealthy, are literally buying these. We need to have a light at the end of the tunnel programs, and even word it that way, because we're rewarding bad spending. We can't fix the economy when too big to fail and too big to jail gets a pass every time. We have to stop the PC thinking, because PC, politically correct thinking, starts with mentioning conclusions. Okay? We have to draw a line in the sand and have zero tolerance for political correctness. And we have to use objective facts in lieu of subjective emotional opinion. I mean, look at some of the things that the mainstream media is calling racist. Bulletproof glass, trees on a golf course, Disney movies. Elizabeth Warren, it's racist calling her Pocahontas when she used false narrative of her Indian heritage to get a job. Milk is racist, not just because it's white, because whites apparently don't have enough lactose intolerance. Folks, we're downgrading into stupid. Science, because black magic can't be explained by students in South Africa. Math is racist. Camouflage is racist. Lucky Charms is racist. Expecting people to show up on time is racist. People, we're living in a censorship Twilight Zone episode. Okay, I'm going to continue. I think to have a strategy with so much uncertainty that we have now, I talk a lot about economics and debt and our credit collapse that's happening, the demographic debt, credit, pension valuation headwinds, which is going to hamper future rates of growth. Trump's doing a great job in a lot of ways, but he inherited sabotage and demolition. Okay? This is why the powers that be are prolonging the crash, because they need to get him out of there, because he said he wants to give America back to the people. And he's arresting thousands and thousands of pedophiles, which, by the way, is not even hitting the mainstream media. So when you look at our debt situation, corporate, global, household, the government promises, we need to prepare because things don't look good. And that's because of demographics, central bank corrupt monetary policies, Keynesian economics, and group identity politics, a.k.a. victim group status. This is why they call it identity politics, because they don't want to wake people up. Everything now is speculation or hedging. So the strategy that I want to put forth is it's better to have a bird in the hand versus two in the bush. Spread out your risks, gain as many skill sets as you can, and don't put everything in one basket. Try to get your ducks in a row. We need heroes in America. We need whistleblowers. We need to have, instead of basically making your heroes athletes, actors, singers, Hollywood actors, let's have the guts to make real heroes our heroes. Besides combat military soldiers who certainly deserve it, I gave an example last week when I was on the air with you, Vince, about a whistleblower who's ex-CIA, Kevin Shipp. Basically, he came out with, there's evidence out there, and that's why there's so much hashtags on Release the Memo, where the DNC paid $12 million to former British intelligence officer Christopher Steele to gather information from second and third-party sources, which turned out to be Russian intelligence. And basically, this is all meant to create the FISA warrants to spy on Donald Trump with the NSA. And I'll go into more detail after the break.
Rick Scheben, offgridmontana.com. Rick Scheben's with us. Solutions for the bottom 93% class. That's us. Rich, please continue.
Thank you, Vince. Going back to examples of heroes, like I mentioned, Kevin Shipp, ex-CIA whistleblower. What we need is heroes in every level. Okay, if you work for the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, any intelligence agency, especially if you're a new hire, you got to be asking yourself, who do you work for? Do you work for the American people or the highest bidder? Big Pharma corrupt policies. If you work inside Big Pharma, you need to be a whistleblower. If you work for the UN, central banks, and you see corrupt monetary policies, you need to be a whistleblower. If you work for any of these AI companies who practices surveillance and censorship on the little people, you need to be a whistleblower. Anybody who works for the mainstream media, you need to stand up. America needs you. Any big corporate government oligarchy, basically our fascist system where the big corporate companies and the big government has created an alliance, that's what fascism is, folks. And that's what we've had, and hopefully it's going to get better. I think Trump's trying to help small business, but it's yet to be determined. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. Lawyers, judges, bankers, politicians, you know what you've done. If anybody, instead of feathering your own nest, if you can benefit the bottom 93% of people and come forward with information to show how the people are being distracted, dumbed down, and divided by all these different groups, and media swaying public opinion and holding on to the narratives, memes, themes, and talking points, come forth. Come forth to show how the little people doesn't have the lobbyists and the PACs and the money and the propaganda to protect themselves anymore and control their own destiny. Come forward. We need to help others, even if it's a little thing like advice. Some people might be hesitant to receive it. I can't tell you how many times I've given advice to people. They usually ask, can I give you advice? And 99% of the time they say yes. And I've had people say who didn't appear like they wanted it, and a week later they're saying exactly what I said to somebody else in public. And it doesn't matter because I don't care about recognition. Most people do things for money, to be liked because they're so insecure, or for fame. I don't care about any of that stuff. I'm trying to stick up for the bottom 93%. I think attorneys and judges should be arrested by the people for releasing non-Americans who do violent crime. We need to forget about words like GDP. These are all economic buzzwords because it doesn't mean success and happiness for the bottom 93%. What's important is words like savings accounts and being debt-free. Boy, I'm going to get to maybe 10% of what I was hoping to, but I'm just going to keep going. We need to get off of Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all these social media sites. Basically what they are, folks, is an elite tool for self-incrimination. The technocracy is killing us. The average person in America spends 7 to 8 hours per day on TV and smartphones. We need to learn to garden, learn to communicate, get rid of, stop texting so much. There's no context in texting. It's basically a degradation tool to lower our communication skills. We need to reinstate Glass-Steagall against the banks and gut Dodd-Frank. Everything is to benefit the elite with no accountability. We need to break up big companies and support small business. Again, all these ideas and solutions I can talk about for an hour each, and I just want to rip through as much as I possibly can. We need to get rid of as much smart everything as we can, and I mean in the context of smart electronic devices, because you can replace the word smart with spy. Teachers at all levels, from kindergarten to PhD, needs to have a minimum of 15 years of successful private sector experience. We got to start teaching practical skills and not theory. And until that happens, get your frickin' kids out of government public schools and teach them what really matters. Practice what you preach laws. I talk about this on almost every radio show I possibly can. I'm so tired of hearing, and I know you are too, words like hypocrisy and double standards. There's no discrimination laws. It's all dependent on what group you're in. I had a lawyer tell me I couldn't sue because I don't have enough group self-pity points as a white male. Aren't you tired of people saying we need to get rid of guns, but yet the same people are hiring security agents to carry guns, often using taxpayer dollars? Or how about we need to lower our carbon footprint and have carbon taxes, and yet they're flying around the world living in multiple big houses with a carbon footprint 10 million times the average Joe? When people say it the way it is, or it will never change, they are poster boys and girls for ignorance, apathy, and indifference. We can't be satisfied with that anymore. We need to have a balance in life between hard work and benefits and time. We need to have a balance between being serious and humor. I mean, I tell jokes every day. Okay, some of them aren't funny. Some of them are. But our biggest problem is the imbalance between technology and nature. We're teaching our children how to push buttons, manage paper, and be politically correct. We all need to grab a microphone, whether you go on a radio show or write a book or have meetings in your neighborhood. We have to talk about the anti-American companies. If you think it's Starbucks and Target, don't go there anymore. We have to talk about the pro-monopoly, we have to break up the antitrust companies, the monopoly companies, the oligarchy companies. Big oligarchy is protected by big government and the court system. We have to start all over and create a whole new system. If there's good companies out there that's pro-American, mention it publicly and visit them. If you like a radio station and they have good advertising, go to those companies. They're sticking their neck out for the American people. If the republic fails, we need to really think about a Switzerland-style country where the president is more of an icon and kind of an example of government, where the people vote on ideas and solutions. How many times have you seen Trump, KKK, no fascist USA chant? Well, think about this political correct crap that we're in. Margaret Sanger, who's a diehard Democrat, created Planned Parenthood to eliminate or reduce black population. Obama doubled black unemployment. I think Trump has some of the best black unemployment numbers ever. Only 4 to 6% of people make their primary income from being self-employed. We have a fascist system. Every group out there, if you are an American second and you are relating to your group by skin pigmentation, gender, sexual orientation, religion, you're being used. You're being played. You've been duped. Look at companies like Nestle, $500 permit to steal 27 million gallons of water from California when the people can't even create their own wells. The elite say we have overpopulation. And, I'm the first to say that quality of life is inversely proportional to population. And that's why I live in Montana. But what if people voted on humane voluntary population control? And we used our leverage of the bottom 93%, said no more wars, no more GMO foods, hormones, steroids, antibiotics, pesticides, no more fluoride and chlorine and 200 other chemicals in our water, no more geoengineering. What if the people got together and said, no more? Now, I've mentioned this a few times. We can fix our economy in a matter of months, but the powers that be have an addiction to power, money, and control. It's going to take everybody to get behind ideas like this. If we break up all big companies, eliminate lobbyist PACs, special interests, get rid of words like oligarchy, monopoly, let the people vote and decide on how much net worth an individual and a corporation can have. And what we could do is do negative interest rates. Now, hear me out here. Banks still have a huge spread on car loans, credit card loans, etc. If we did negative interest rates with means testing, and like I mentioned a few moments ago, shake things up with reintroducing Glass-Steagall. Means testing means that if we went to negative interest rates and you had a certain net worth, say under $1 million, you wouldn't be penalized with those fees with negative interest rates. And at the same time, the means testing on the upper end, you can't be a corporation and get free money and pay off your stock options, dividends, and create all this free money and stock options for the executives and do more mergers and acquisitions. Not to mention the fact bringing in more robotics, automation, artificial intelligence. Let's say we had 100-year mortgages and take the mean household debt and give that amount to each home. If you're in debt, you have to pay it off. If you're out of debt, you have to be spending it, and maybe spend it in the form of a voucher to prevent hyperinflation and dismantle all the central banks and eliminate debt-based currency. If we did those ideas, our economy could be fixed in 6 months. Keep in mind, Trump said he wants to transfer power back to the people. Let's all be Americans and help him out. This guy has, I think, $1 salary. He's put his own safety and the safety of his family on the line. He's not perfect. I don't know anybody who is. And if we all looked in the mirror right now, would we be perfect? I think we all have a long way to go. I mean, we have Christmas trees going up in Iraq. ISIS has been beat back. And that's thank God to the alliance that we have with Russia, who's done a lot of that. I'd rather be allies with Russia than enemies. I mean, I think everybody in America saw the tax plan that they loved when it was supposedly from Bernie Sanders. Well, it turned out to be the GOP tax plan. This is degrading and disrespectful to the left. The left takes advantage of low-information voters. Now, he's gained over 2 million jobs, even though, net worth for the little guy, it hasn't changed much, and hospitality and service industry has the highest growth. But he's trying, and we'll go into more detail after the break, folks. Thank you so much for listening.
Rich Sheben's with us, offgridmontana.com. We'll continue with the bottom 93% solutions when we come back. Rich Sheben's on a roll. He's talking about the bottom 93% and what you can do to correct what's happening here in America. Rich, please continue.
Thank you, Vince. The JAMA, Journal of American Medical Association, recently mentioned that 30% of drugs approved by the FDA are seriously dangerous. Look at alternative medicine, naturopath, homeopathy. I give tours on edible and medicinal plants. I harvest a dry mushroom called chaga, which is high in SOD, superoxide dismutase. I harvest it off a birch tree, so I get the benefit of the butylene and butylic acid, which is also cancer tumor fighters and immune stimulants. There's different ways to do things. We need to educate each other. We need to get back into nature and create that balance again. We need to get out of our comfort zone, use objective facts in lieu of subjective emotional opinions. I mentioned monopolies and the oligarchies and the antitrust law people. We need to break up all these banks, reinstate Glass-Steagall. They'd be caught embezzling, stealing, defrauding, manipulating, precious metals, silver, gold, the Libor scandal, which stole $8 trillion over 6 years. And they want to have, their own digital currency, not a decentralized digital currency. What could possibly go wrong? All the big pharma, the Google Alphabets, Apple, Microsoft, Facebook, Amazon, all the FANGs, they're going to take over the world if we don't stand up and speak up. The ideas and solutions have to change from the bottom up. Remember, we have a land of the free and the home of the brave. Okay? We gave up. We had millions of combat soldiers give their life for our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. And just remember, all these complaints about Trump, he's done, I think I was cut off by the break, but besides giving over 2 million jobs, blacks and Hispanics have the lowest unemployment rate in history. He signed the tax cut bill. He cut regulations, minimum 2 for 1. There's an American energy boom. ISIS has been beat back. More nations are paying their fair share, like with NATO defense. He's got more accountability in the VA, thanks to protection from our whistleblowers. He's appointed Justice Neil Gorsuch to the U.S. Supreme Court. He's done a lot of good things, and he's only been there for a year, and he's got to break up this swamp because there's so many people who are bought and paid for. That's what corruption is. We have traded in hard work, effort, proven results, and qualifications for corruption, manipulation, nepotism, and deception. That's what America is. And it's got to change from the bottom up. Remember, silence equals consent. Consent equals the Incorporated States of America / the divided groups of America. We need to be our own media. We need to bring back citizen journalism. I mean, Facebook and Twitter is basically run by the Chinese. Remember Facebook had a child porn scandal on there? And they said hunt and kill all whites is not hate speech? Really? And Huffington Post defending articles where a lawyer doesn't exist, and the word "to" is sexist, and CNN says the words "hard worker" is racist. The mainstream media has had thousands of hoax sites, basically fake news, bought and paid for news, misleading information, and 50 versions of the same story. If we don't have the same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody, and you're only defending your own group, you're putting America last, and you have a globalist dream. We need to learn to grow and raise food. Even the FDA admits over 70% of chickens in the U.S. contain cancer-causing arsenic. We need to shoot pool and play chess. And what I mean by that is, we got what do the best pool players and chess players have in common, folks? They think 2, 3, 4, 5 moves ahead. That's what we need to do. All social programs and entitlements get paid from the top down. 8 people, again, have half the world net worth. We have to do something about that. And after the break, I'll go into more detail.
Rich Sheaben's with us. And we're going into top of the hour news and commercial announcements class. And right after that, hour number 2 of USA Prepares. And additionally, we're going to be talking about some stories. We're going to be talking about things that have happened, things that we've seen, and our take on them. Let me tell you what we've done, what we've said. We're outspoken. We're a bunch of activists here at USA Prepares. And we don't take direction very well. We really don't. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Rich Sheaben's with us, offgridmontana.com. Rich, you've got some more on the bottom 93% ideas and solutions?
Oh, gosh. I'm going to leave it up to you. I can go another several hours. So if you have other things you want to talk about, we can certainly go there. Or if you want me to do another segment, I can certainly do that. You decide.
Well, I'll tell you what, let me share with our class a couple of things that have happened that I think are of extreme importance. I talked about how I was moving the broadcast studio to another part of the house. The idea is mainly I want to save some heat. Okay, we have to heat a portion of the house that we would not have to heat in these extreme temperatures we've been experiencing if I move the studio. And it gives me more light. So I'm doing that. And I mentioned last week that I bought some doors, some French doors. Actually, the style of our house is a French classic farmhouse. That is the style. And the doors that I want to put in are French doors into our dining room. I'm converting our dining room into a studio. And the doors that I bought are standard size. They come in 3 feet and 4 feet. And they're less expensive if you buy a standard size rather than the custom size. So a custom size might cost three times as much as a standard size. So I bought standard doors. And after I removed some of the sheetrock, I found out that the opening, the studded opening, is a little bit too small. And now, I bought the doors at a company called T.H. Rogers. T.H. Rogers is the company that quoted the doors and honored the commitment, even when the supplier of the doors to them said, no, we made a mistake and the price is higher than we quoted you, so we're going to have to charge you more. Well, T.H. Rogers ended up meeting their original equipment to sell me the doors, and what really happened was everybody agreed to meet their original commitment. So the supplier did, T.H. Rogers did, and Russell, who is the store manager at T.H. Rogers in Lebanon, Missouri, met his commitment and agreement with me. So everybody's happy. And so I had an idea of how I could make this door opening a little bit wider without weakening the studs in the walls that support the roof. So I called up Russell and I said, here's my idea. And we talked about it with T.H. Rogers. And they agreed that this was this idea would work. Now, I want to compare that to a big box store. Do you think you could go into, a Lowe's or Home Depot and say to the guy, hey, listen, I'm putting in a door and I want to change the framing and I want to make these changes. Do you think they've got people there who can help you? I'm not so sure they do. So that is one of the reasons why if you can shop at a lumberyard where they actually have professionals that are there week after week after week, year after year after year, people who stay with the company for a long time and make it a profession, that's worth considering if you plan on needing some help. So just a thought. That's one story. Next story is I mentioned that we have a neighbor who is a senior citizen and her brakes failed. Well, we put the car on the truck on the lift. It's a 2004 model Chevy, and it had a brake failure in the brake lines. Why? Because of the road salt. Why? Because they mix beet juice with road salt, and it's causing cars to rust like crazy. How much? Well, cars used to rust at about $200 a year in damage. Back in 1975. $200 worth of rust per year, per car, in 1975 due to road salt. Well, today it's more like $850 a year per car due to road salt. Why? Because the road salt is more corrosive. They're mixing it with beet juice, road salt and beet juice. It's causing bridges to fail. It's causing concrete roads to fail, curbs to fail. Just look around. You'll see it. It's causing rust on steel, on bridges. It's causing rust underneath your car. That's why your rocker panels below your doors are rusting on a lot of vehicles that have metal there. And it's causing brake lines to fail. Well, I know 3 people who own a 2004 Chevrolet pickup truck. We're one of them. We had to replace the brake lines. Our neighbor had to replace his brake lines. And now we're working on another neighbor who had to replace brake lines because of rust. It's caused by 2 things. One, the car manufacturers are not protecting the steel as they used to. Volvo used to spray the undercarriage of their car, including the brake lines, everything you could think of, with a rust preventative tar type spray. The entire bottom of the car. They would protect the vehicle as much as possible. Now here in America, we don't do that. We just let them rust, and we figure you need a new car in a few years anyway, right? Planned obsolescence. Well, here's the rest of the story. So the brake lines, you can buy brake lines and make them yourself. They used to cost a couple dollars. Now, to change the brake lines in a Chevy pickup truck is about $1,000 proposition. It's $20 worth of parts now. And it's $1,000 if you have somebody do it. Why? Because you have a choice. If it's a rear brake line, you can take the pickup truck bed off. Now think about that. Take a couple guys to do it, maybe four people to lift it off after you unbolt it, after you get under there and unbolt it. We're talking about the bed of a pickup truck and the tailgate. You know, lights are on there. It's a problem. Or you can put the car up in the air on a lift and you can take the gas tank off after you drain it. So how much gas is in a gas tank? Well, probably half a tank on average, 13 gallons on average. And there's no drain plug. And the gas tanks are designed so that you can't siphon gas out. So as a feature for the owner, there is a bend in the fill pipe so that you can't stick a hose down there and siphon gas out. So you have to figure out how you can get the gas out of the gas tank without a drain plug and without siphoning it. How do you do it? Well, you use the electric fuel pump. So that means you have to figure out which relay does what under the hood and jumper it. Okay, once you do that, you have to have an adapter that will allow fuel to come out of the fuel port under the hood. So now you need a special tool, and you need to make another tool to jumper the relay. That's why it's $1,000. And how many people does it take to lift the gas tank out? A couple. So to replace a brake line is a two-person job. It's ridiculous. Well, we bought the brake lines. We bought them pre-manufactured. They came in a huge box. How big? 14 inches by 8 inches by 58 inches. What's the shipping on that? $40. How much does it weigh? Well, the box weighs more than the brake lines. Feels like an empty box. About $40 shipping. So we get the brake lines, and they're really nice. They look beautiful. They're made in China. They're made out of stainless steel. Except on closer inspection, we find out that two of them are bad. Two of them have pits in them. And our son calls the auto parts store and says, I just want to let you know. And they said, yeah, we know. That's why we don't like to sell them. Because we get so many of them back. Now, why am I telling you all this? I'm telling you this because if you look to your left or your right when you're on the highway, or you look in front of you or behind you, you are surrounded by vehicles that are rusting. And the brake lines are rusting. Now, is that guy with that boat behind his truck, does he have rusted brake lines? And when he steps on the brake behind you, is he going to fail? I don't know. But I'm telling you that we have to replace all of the brake lines on this neighbor's truck. Why? Because all of them are rusted. I should take some pictures and show you. I think I'll do that and put that on the website to show you how bad this problem is. It's unbelievable. So why is it that the guy who changed the oil on this pickup truck and put the old oil filter back on, why didn't he say to this 80-year-old woman, ma'am, I want you to know that your brake lines are really rusted. This is going to be a huge problem soon. Why didn't he tell her? Because we're not paying attention. Mechanics, they call these people who change the oil at these quick lubrication places, quick oil change places, they call them mechanics. Really? Those are mechanics? I don't think so. I think they're wannabes. I don't think they're paying attention. And how many failures are there because of these, we'll call them mechanics in quotes, changing the oil? What do? Well, they forget things, like to put the oil filler cap back on. Car drives out of the oil change. Smoke comes out from under the hood. Why? Because oil's being sprayed all over the engine and the exhaust manifold. It's a fire hazard. They forgot to put the oil fill cap on. Or they forgot to take off the gasket from the previous oil filter. And you drive a couple miles, oil pressure builds up, the heat builds up, the two gaskets instead of one like they're supposed to be, one of them blows out, and then the oil comes out of the engine, then you're running the engine without oil on the highway. And it does damage. The engine is not the same after it runs without oil. Oil change company says, geez, listen, we'll send a pickup, we'll pick up your vehicle and we'll, no charge for the oil that you lost, no charge. But the engine's been damaged. This is what's going on in America, and it's an outrage. One last thing. We bought a garbage disposal for our daughter. Hers failed. So I did research, and I bought one called Waste King. Okay. Did the research. It has great reviews. They're being recalled. Thousands of them. What brand do they go under? Barracuda, Frank, Frigidaire, Gemline, Kenmore, Kitchen Eater, Lux Art, Moen, Steam 33, and Waste King. It's on the website if you want to see it. How many of them? Thousands of them. Why? They're made in China. They're made in China, and they fly apart. The internal pieces will fly apart. Can you imagine working at your sink, hitting the switch, and having a metal part come flying out from centrifugal force out of your waste disposal unit? 146,000 of them. For achievements with us, and Rich in class, we might think that automakers would fight against governments, government corporations salting our roads with beet salt, causing unnecessary car crashes and deaths and rust and damage to the bridges and roads in the United States. Now, I believe that the automobile industry likes the idea of this beet salt rusting our automobiles prematurely, causing planned obsolescence that they can say, well, it's not us. We make a great car. It's the darn road salt. And then the governments would say, well, we got to keep you safe. Heck, we can't let the roads freeze, so we need to salt the roads. But most people don't realize that it's beet juice and road salt combined, which is causing this uncontrolled rust of these vehicles. And if you don't believe me, here's the challenge. Go look at the rocker panels, that part under the doors of a Chevy pickup truck or a Ford pickup truck or a Dodge pickup truck. Look at the bumpers. You will see rust eating in Missouri. Now, some states don't salt the roads at all, and good for them. But here in Missouri, if you look at vehicles, you will see the salt is eating right through the chrome-plated bumpers. Imagine that. Imagine your bumper rusting through. Not little surface rust. I'm talking about rusting right through. So what do? What's the answer? Well, we have cars that we drive in the wintertime. Why? Because they've already rusted. The ones that haven't rusted, we don't take out in the wintertime when it's salted. The roads are salty. We don't. It's a huge problem. How much is a car today? 30 grand? How much is a truck? 40 grand? Really? You gonna take that thing out in weather when the roads have been salted? So what we do is, if we had an emergency, we would take the garden hose and wash the underside of the vehicle, wash behind the bumpers, wash the entire car thoroughly under the hood to get that salt off. But you can't get it all off. It's impossible. How bad is it? Well, these cars with the plastic bumpers. Well, behind them, there's some styrofoam, and behind the styrofoam is some steel, heavy steel. Take a look at this steel. You won't believe it, because a lot of that steel is not painted, it's not rust-proofed, it's not primed, and you won't believe the rust. It is so bad here in Missouri that the spare tires under the trucks, there's a little winch, and you put this long rod in this hole in the bumper, and you crank it, and it lowers the spare tire. And there's a clasp and a catch that locks that spare tire in so that it won't fall out. Well, on the Chevrolet model 2004 trucks, and the models just a little bit before it and after it, that rusts shut. So you've got a flat tire, you're on the side of the road, you crank down, you know how to do it, you know how to take the lug nuts off, the hubcaps. It's real easy, right? All you do is just crank that tire down. But you can't get the tire off the cable that holds the tire up under the bed. Why? Because it's rusted shut. Don't believe me? Ask anyone who has a 2004 or so model Chevrolet truck in Missouri. They can't get your spare tire off. You can't do it. Rich Scheben? Any comments?
Well, you're 100% right. We're living in a planned obsolescence, disposable society. And the powers that be want to raise GDP, so they want things to disintegrate in our hands, in front of our eyes, so we have to go out there and buy more. And this is why they want to keep us in debt. This is why the credit industry is collapsing, and we're in big trouble. And this is why we do these shows. It's to create ideas and solutions, give people the ammunition to have the guts to speak up and stand for principle, which is, I define principle as the same rules, laws, and accountability. Everything needs to be based on truth. And if somebody does something with lesser consequences to their behaviors because of what group they're in, we do it too. And if you don't like it, that's when we create practice what you preach laws, as I mentioned earlier, Vince.
Okay, and I've got a comment about that when we come back. I've got a solution for this rust problem. I really do. Rich Shealy, and I'll be right back. Offgridmontana.com. Okay, so I've got some solutions here for this problem with rust and people being injured from car crashes, from brake lines that have rusted through, and rust-caused failures that have caused accidents and so forth. So lawyers, if there are any lawyers out there, I don't think there are any lawyers listening to us, but if there were, they could institute a class action suit against Chevrolet and General Motors for the failure of these brake lines in the Chevy trucks. Okay, that's one thing. So I looked up the word vandalism. Now, it'll take me about 2 minutes to go through this, so please bear with me, class. Vandalism is an offense that occurs when a person destroys or defaces someone else's property without permission. Effects of vandalism can include broken windows, graffiti, damage to vehicles, and even damage or destruction to a person's website. So, damage to vehicles is considered vandalism. Okay. Now, what is a casualty loss? Well, according to IRS.gov, a casualty loss is something you may be able to deduct a casualty loss based on the damage done to your property during a disaster. A casualty is a sudden, unexpected, unusual event. This may include natural disasters like hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, and earthquakes. It can include losses from fires, accidents, thefts, or vandalism. Vandalism. Normal wear and tear is excluded. A casualty loss does not include losses from normal wear and tear. It does not include progressive deterioration from age or termite damage. But casualty losses can be a result of vandalism. And vandalism, we said, is destruction, intentional destruction. So I'm saying that there's a really fine line, and I'm willing to go right up to that line on my tax return. And I'm willing to say that, well, my truck has been vandalized and has caused thousands of dollars of damage. And therefore, I'm going to deduct it from income that I've earned because my car has been vandalized by corporations posing as government by putting salt on the road and not telling me about it. Is it a stretch? Now, if you decide to pursue that, you're on your own. I'm on my own, too. But I got to tell you, I'm outraged. I'm outraged at the damage that has been caused by corporations posing as government. It's costing us a fortune. Just look around at the infrastructure. The roads and bridges and so forth. Just look around. They're falling down. Just a thought. 2 thoughts of my solutions as to ways we can solve this problem. If General Motors gets hit with lawsuits because of these rusted brake lines, I think it's great. I think we ought to do it. What are they going to say? Well, it's normal wear and tear? Normal wear and tear? Really? Could it have been prevented? Of course. Of course. Better design, stainless steel brake lines, that'd be a step in the right direction. Not using beet salt on the roads, that'd be a nice step in the right direction. Rich, do they use salt on your roads?
I believe they do. I don't think it's... they use salt and sand. I don't think they use as much salt as some states because we're more of a dry state. We don't have as much of an ice issue. Mm-hmm. But they do use it, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And have you seen trucks that are rusted out, tailgates that are rusted through? I mean, is it just Missouri where I see this kind of thing?
No, we have rust here. Again, because we don't have the humidity and we're more of a dry state. and I think we use less salt per capita than you guys or the East Coast in general. I think if you looked, and this is a very general statement, being from the New York City area for 26 years, I think it was pretty obvious that there's more rust on the East Coast than on the West Coast. Because when you have a high population, the powers that be justifies their plausible deniability by putting down more salt. They don't care if it wrecks the vehicles. And with the humidity and moisture that you have, you're going to have more rust in the first place.
I just looked up, can you go to jail for vandalism? Here's what the Internet says. Many acts of vandalism are misdemeanors, meaning the maximum penalties include fines and up to a year in the local jail. However, vandalism that results in serious damage to valuable property is a felony. Defendant charged with a felony can face more than a year in state prison and significant fines. I am maintaining that what is happening to these vehicles is vandalism. George in New Hampshire, welcome. You're on with Rich Scheben and me.
Hi, Vince, and hello, Rich. Hello. I wanted to recommend something that I think could go a long way to prevent having to replace the brake lines and the premature rust underneath the car. As we all know, when you get sand and salt on the roads and your tires are just basically spinning it upwards, it's almost like a sandblaster underneath your car going at times. They have something called, it's a Rust-Oleum product called Rust Reformer, and it converts rust to like a protected surface. What it does is it makes it so the oxygen can't get at the rust, or the rust-inducing agents like the salts, the sand, debris, whatnot, can't, basically go to work on that metal, which a lot of times the quality of the metal, as you say, especially coming from places like China, are very questionable metallurgy. But I found you can get this at the Chinese outlet store for about, or a hardware store for like about $5, $6-7. And I'd say 2 cans would probably do it. And if your car's high enough, you could just literally just put a mat down, crawl underneath. You don't want to breathe the stuff in because, and you don't want to do it in an enclosed space because not only the smell, but it's got some fumes. But if you do it outdoors, it's like you spray it underneath the car. And I found that I've had cars that were like 20 years old, and once in a while I might need a brake line replaced because I'm in a state that uses beet juice, which I thought was environmentally responsible until this is a USA first. I've never heard this anywhere else, and I'm sure Rich would probably say the same thing. Huh, Rich?
I was well aware of the salt, but the beet juice was a new one.
Yeah, that's what I mean, the beet juice. I thought they were doing it to kind of like maybe lessen the environmental impact, but then again. But what do you think, Vince, about what I just said about that stuff you can spray and it turns to a hard black finish? And I've seen one other gentleman that does it, and he's got an older truck, probably the vintage of that Chevy, and when I looked at it, it was remarkable how nice it looked underneath.
Well, I just looked it up, and I found this Rust-Oleum product. It's available in a spray can. It's $5.96 without the tax. For a couple cans, $12 plus tax, it sounds like that's a great way to go. And in addition, I was talking to Miles about this, Miles in Europe, and they've got a problem there too. And he sprays his vehicles with a lubrifilm. It's a fine oil, and it coats and it clings and it prevents moisture and the salts carried with the moisture from adhering. But you got to do it every year. Now, if you have a lift, it's not so bad. You put a respirator on and a suit and protective suit, and yeah, it's a great idea. There's some other things that you can do, and I was reading on the internet about this years ago. And what some people have done is very, very clever. They will take a mixture of, those wax rings that toilets are sealed with. So if you lift up your toilet, there's this round ring made out of wax. Well, they're about $1 a piece, maybe $2 now, maybe $3. And you can add some diesel fuel and heat that wax. And you have to be very careful you don't cause a fire when you heat that wax. And you can mix the wax ring with the diesel fuel and make a spray out of that and spray it on the underneath of the vehicle, and that wax becomes a protective coating as well. So there's several ways you can do it. And what I did was I bought a Rust-Oleum product. I did not get the one that you recommended, unfortunately. I got the undercoating product, and I sprayed it inside. I made a nozzle, and I sprayed it inside all the cavities on the rocker panels, and I still had the rust. So my car is getting lighter every time. My truck is getting lighter every time I take it for a spin because rust parts just fall off. And when they asked me what color vehicle I drove at DMV, Division of Motor Vehicles, I said, well, it's kind of rust color. And it's rust color with a little bit of white. It makes me angry. It makes me angry that this is happening because it doesn't have to happen. This is a serious problem. We're not talking about just a cosmetic effect of the rust. We're talking about, if you look under the vehicle, you'll see the frames are rusted. If the gas tanks were made out of metal, they'd be rusted, but they're typically plastic now. But the fuel lines, the brake lines, the suspension parts, the shock absorbers, the mounting parts, the supports that hold the fenders from flapping in the wind as you travel, those things are rusting off. As a matter of fact, probably one of the most dangerous things I saw underneath this truck my son is working on, with a little bit of my assistance, is that there's a grounding strap that's made out of copper, and it goes from the filler neck in the gas door where you put your gasoline in to the gas tank. There's a copper strap that bonds the filler neck to the frame of the truck. That rusted through. That's a pretty serious problem because as you have those gas air fumes and you're putting gas in the tank and there's a static spark, that's a great place to have an explosion. Well, that's what this grounding strap is there to prevent. Well, that was rusted through. So I'm very, very concerned. George, if you'd like to hang with us,
sure.
I'd love to hear your comments.
Sure.
Yeah. Rich Scheben, Off-Grid Montana, George in New Hampshire. We'll be right back. Rich Scheben's with us, offgridmontana.com. George in New Hampshire's with us. Both these gentlemen are USA Preparedness instructors. George, I think you hit the nail right on the head. I just looked up this rust reformer. It says, stop rust in its tracks with Rust-Oleum Automotive Rust Reformer. Without sanding, the coating bonds with rusty metal, transforming it into a flat, black, non-rusting surface. Instantly convert rust into a protected, paintable surface. Prevent future rust and corrosion. It sounds like a great product. And for 2 cans for about $12, it sounds like it's certainly worth a try. It also sounds like it works, as you said.
I just want to give a warning, though, is that I don't recommend that it's sprayed on the exhaust pipe or the exhaust muffler, which I know you and Rich would know, being around cars and all that,
Sure.
And knowledgeable about it. But the thing is, and not to spray it near any electrical components in the car, but if you see a bolt that's rusting, that's somewhat isolated, if it ever has to come off, it'll protect it because a lot of moisture gets into the car when it moves in various places, and you just go as far. In other words, we don't go overboard, but every year or so when your mechanic gets the car on a lift and you look underneath, you can see certain spots that need some attention, but it will have slowed down the rust to such a degree that, let's just say, it'll last an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, basically.
Mm-hmm. As you're saying this, I was thinking about some of the vehicles that we've seen here at the farm, some of our neighbors' vehicles, and we help them, with problems they have. And I got to tell you that the salt, this beet juice, it is such a problem that I'll bet you that many ladies who know how to change a tire, if they're stuck on the side of the road and they decide to do this themselves, they won't have the physical strength to loosen the lug nuts on the vehicles because of the salt with the beet juice has formed an adhesion so that you can't get these lug nuts off. And I'm not just picking on ladies. We've had guys that have had problems too. Big guys. I'm just saying that, gosh, this is a real problem. Can you imagine having a flat tire and having one of these pickup trucks, and you know how to do it? You crank down the spare tire and you can't get it off because it's rusted onto the cable. You can't get the tire off the mechanism that winches the spare tire down from being under the truck bed, and you can't get the lug nuts off because they're rusted in place. Can you imagine that? That's what we're talking about.
What I find is when I change a tire, I'll spray that rust reformer onto the lugs, and then what I'll do is that then I'll let it dry, and then I'll spray a good lubricant underneath there. So when I seal it back up, it's going to make it a lot easier the next time when you do have to take it off to basically get it off again. Simple thing,
Yeah, I'm going to say something that I recommend that people. They're on their own if they do this. What I've been doing for probably since the 60s is I've been putting a light coat of grease on the threads of the wheel studs and the mating surface of the lug nut, so that there's a good coating, so that when I go to take the lug nuts off, they come off. However, there is a danger in doing that. If you don't torque them to the appropriate torque, the lug nuts can come loose and you can lose your wheel. They can just come right off as you're traveling. So we torque them down with a torque wrench. And it's not recommended. No dealership will say that they do that. So what happens is they wear out the wheels, they wear out the lug nuts, they wear out the studs when you change your tires. That's what happens. So we rotate our tires very often, and our vehicles have a couple 100,000 miles on it. So if we do that every 5,000 miles or so, rotate the tires, that's a lot of on and off with the lug nuts and the wheels and the tires. So there's a lot of wear there, and that's why we lubricate them. But you've got to be careful. You've got to check them and check them and check them to make sure that they don't come off while you're traveling. And you've got to use a torque wrench. And you've got to use the right torque. And there's torque with lubricant and torque without lubricant. And I'm not going to tell you how to do a class. If you decide to do it, you've got to do it on your own and be responsible for it. Don't come back to me if you have a problem if you do it. George, thank you so much for being with us today, calling in. Rich Shealy, thanks so much for being with us.
My pleasure.
Class, above all, honesty and integrity.